Daniel, you have returned to us.
I am back.
We are so happy.
Yeah,
to have
I heard
again.
you recorded with Brian, right?
Yes. Brian is very fun to record with. We did make fun of you a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Well, I looked on the calendar where you were, and it just said haunt. I couldn't decide if you were taking some time off to haunt people, that you're just, a ghost part-time. I guessed that it was some sort of ridiculous, goofy ghost hunting thing, and it turns out I was kind of right.
You were kind of right. It was a game retreat. I run several of those. This one was a Halloween-themed game retreat that we called The Haunt, but we did one night have a professional ghost hunter show up and talk us through a bunch of stuff. So that was kind of fun.
And you didn't catch any ghosts? We
didn't catch any ghosts. The closest we got was somebody thought they heard a noise in the elevator. Yeah.
Did you bring any of the equipment? Did you have the little thing that goes bzz, 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 through different radio stations?
We had one of those.
Uh-huh.
I didn't bring it here. But if anyone out there is interested in collecting EVPs, you just use your own phone, a little recording app on your phone. But you got to be in a place. This is the delightful part about EVPs for me, is they work really well when you're in a place like an elevator that has a lot of weird background noises, because then it's very easy to misidentify something as a sound. So,
well, it's probably a sound. Misidentify
it as words, as a supernatural being talking to you.
Mm-hmm. What is that? There's a word for seeing faces and things.
Pareidolia.
Yeah. So is there an auditory version?
No. I assume there would have to be.
Seems like a lot of this ghost hunting equipment is just like pareidolia?
Pareidolia.
Facilitating devices to help you to be able to misidentify.
Like if you've ever done those things online where they say, watch this with, listen to this video with your eyes closed, and it sounds like they're saying one thing. And then if you watch their mouths, it sounds like they're saying a different thing. And if I tell you this phrase, then suddenly you'll be able to hear it. I suspect that's what most EVPs actually are. So
I suspect that's what all EVPs actually are. So we're very similar to each other.
And Brandon, if you're wondering,
what's that?
I was going to say, to answer your question, it is just called auditory, however you pronounce it.
Auditory pareidolia.
Yeah.
Thank you, unpaid paid intern, Donald.
Mysterious voice in the darkness.
I am darkness.
I was going to say, those that aren't misidentifications are probably pranks and or plants.
Possibly.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, though.
We have. I would like to believe that some of this paranormal stuff is real, but I remain unconvinced.
Well, I am glad that there are people like you that find mystery and wonder in trying to decide if dead people hang out in the places that they've been killed in order to troll the living.
That was one of the questions I asked the ghost hunter, was, what do you personally think that a ghost is? Because there's so many different theories. Like, is it just a dead person hanging out? Is it psychic echoes left behind by a person? The one thing I didn't ask her because it felt really dark was, is it some other entity that is like taking on the role of a dead person, pretending to be a ghost? I don't know.
And what did she say?
She said, of the first two options, she said that she has experienced both.
Okay.
And believes that both are real.
There you go. I think that might be part of why she's a ghost hunter.
Very, very definitely.
So you have a food heist.
I do.
You return to us, the prodigal Dan, with a food heist.
I do. This is one of our Fringe heists. Okay. This is not an actual team of people entering a place and stealing a bunch of food, but it is food related, and it is definitely theft.
Okay.
Or fraud. So this happened a few weeks ago. A guy in Jackson, Mississippi, hacked into the Hinds County Human Services Department.
Hinds County. So it's ketchup related in
Hinds, Hinds.
Okay.
And
that was going to be really fun.
Hacked into their human services department and approved all applications for food stamps and then hit the button that says send out checks right now. And so like every current and new applicant in their system got $2,500 in food stamps instantly approved and sent out.
What did they do? Did
they arrested him?
Well, I mean him. What did they do to the people? Like, did they take away the food stamps from the hungry people?
I don't know.
Because that's like, I'm sure that you aren't the type of person who does this unless going to jail for it is like,
Yeah.
You are prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the sort of chaotic good that he knew what he was doing, or she knew what she was doing.
Yeah, he.
But what I want to know is, did they immediately be like, "Oh, you're going to jail," and none of these people get their food?
I don't know. I imagine that if you managed to spend your food stamps before they got to you, then they were just out of luck, and you spent your food stamps.
Right.
But boy, I don't know. I want to say that I don't think the wheels of government turn fast enough to figure out exactly which of those, how much did each person have approved over what they should have had approved. But on the other hand, when it comes to taking things away from people, the wheels of government do work pretty fast.
They do.
Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but yeah.
Yeah, I would love a follow-up on that, to know if our Food Heist Robin Hood is has done something in vain. I wonder what they'll charge him with also, because boy, I sure wouldn't want to be the prosecutor who has to prosecute that in front of a jury. Right?
A jury of his peers?
Yes.
Convince them he was wrong for feeding a bunch of poor people?
Yes. I mean, you shouldn't do this, right?
You shouldn't do this, but he absolutely is a Robin Hood, right?
Yes. This is the very definition of Robin Hood. It's the sort of thing where it's like, I mean, I can't be mad at you, right? But
Well, and I guess if we're going to start splitting hairs, taking the money out of the Human Services Department means that it didn't go to someone else that needed it for something else that was not a food stamp. So there's definitely problems caused, but Anyway, I thought that was a cool story.
Well, we don't let him in Food Heist prison. Definitely too noble a person, at least in intent, to make it in a Food Heist prison.
Wouldn't last a day.
Yeah, he has to be sent to some other sort of,
Awesome.
Maybe need to start a new prison for the Robin Hoods of the world. Some of those others that went in the Food Heist prison, they kind of had moral arguments for why they were doing what they were doing as well. So
so that there's definitely a nice subset of Food Heist prison that has some moral high ground.
Yes, indeed. So we are going to talk today about a movie. I feel like it's been a while.
It has been a while, and it's been a while since this movie came out.
Yes.
Once again, we are on the cutting edge.
Yes. Wasn't it just like earlier this spring, though?
Yeah, it was this year. So it's not like we're going to talk about, I don't know.
It's May 3rd,
Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane. Hey, have you seen Citizen Kane?
I have seen Citizen Kane.
Did you like Citizen Kane?
I did like Citizen Kane.
I thought Citizen Kane was pretty good.
It was okay.
Hot take.
Yeah. Surprise.
I watched it because Micah, my roommate, was a film major, and he's like, "You haven't seen Citizen Kane? We are watching Citizen Kane." And I watched Citizen Kane, and I thought, that is a good movie.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the world was waiting to hear what we had to say.
What we have to say about Citizen Kane.
Next week, we will talk about Hamlet and our opinions. But no, we're going to talk about The Fall Guy.
Ooh, yes. The Fall Guy.
Fall Guy's actually more interesting.
Ryan Gosling.
Interesting to talk about, I think. Because what can you say about Citizen Kane? That's really cool.
Yeah.
The jump cut with the screeching bird's a bit cheap.
It pioneered a lot of filmmaking techniques and does not seem as innovative today as it was when it came out.
But it's still lit and shot really fantastically. And so, so The Fall Guy. When did you see The Fall Guy?
I saw The Fall Guy a few months ago.
Okay.
But not too long ago.
Okay.
It had definitely been out for a while by the time I finally said, "Hey, Dawn, we're going to watch The Fall Guy."
And Emily and I have been hearing for months the same thing repeated by many, many people. We saw The Fall Guy and it was actually good. Why did no one go to this movie?
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of the story of why did nobody go to this movie? Has a star in it who, was critically acclaimed and part of the biggest box office smash of the year before, playing a role which he did a fantastic job with. It had Emily Blunt,
who is always great.
Who doesn't want to see a movie with Emily Blunt in it, right? Like that's just one of the names you put on the poster that makes you say, "Oh, this is going to be elevated by her presence." And it's so why didn't people? And it's a really smartly written, interesting movie. We'll talk about. I had some. I would say my opinion of it is it was like a solid 7, maybe 7.5. Right?
Okay.
But I went into it not wanting a 9 or a 10, right? Because the 9s and 10s are they're like Dune or like Spielberg. They hit differently. And I went into it kind of wanting a really solid 7 or 8.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And it was. I felt that it really kind of, I don't know. There were elements of it that didn't land for me, and I'm sure there were for you as well. There were bits where I was like, "Really? That's how they paid that off?"
Yeah, I think my complaint would both be to the writing, even though I just complimented the writing, because some of the writing is really sharp and some of it is real flabby.
Yeah,
and that's basically my only complaint, because this is 10 out of 10 stunts, which is exactly what you needed for this film. It was really well cast and really well acted. Everyone felt really great in their role. There are definitely some archetypes going on, and things like that. But
ironically, I don't know if I would give it 10 out of 10 on stunts.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I don't know where my 10 is. Like, is John Wick that comes out and redefines stunt choreography for everyone, is that a 10 or is that an 11? Because this was not that.
This was not that, but I think you can have a 10 that doesn't redefine.
Yeah.
I think you can, right? Like maybe your defining things need a 10 star, like you indicate. But I feel like I could give this a 10 out of stunts. These are the best stunts I've seen in a show in a long time. Since something like John Wick or whatnot. I mean, there is the safe chase in Fast and Furious, which is probably the best single stunt I've seen. But the number of stunts, the variety of the stunts, the love of stunts, the use of stunts repeatedly as plot devices was really fun.
It absolutely was. I wish some of them had been in longer takes instead of chopped up, but that is probably the editing rather than the stunt work.
Okay.
So I should aim my criticism correctly. Fall Guy.
So shall I talk about what kept it from being like, this could have been an 8 or a 9?
First, I want to ask if you ever watched the show.
I watched the show enough to remember it when this came out and be like, oh, that show that I saw sometimes. And when the theme song came on, I knew the theme song. But I would have been watching the show when I was 5 to 7. Yeah. So even the era before I watched like A-Team and Knight Rider and the stuff that I kind of consider my generation, this is the end of the previous generation. And so I did not have any nostalgic fondness for it going in at all.
Okay. Yeah, I'm about the same. I remember watching it. I remember, when I saw the movie and like the truck showed up, I was like, oh, that's the truck from The Fall Guy. But yeah, I didn't have, I don't have an immense love for the property,
and I wonder
or a deep knowledge of the property.
If that's part of the problem with this whole thing, is that you could have, I think this would have done better if it weren't named The Fall Guy. And this is just an instinct on my part. I think that a lot of us saw this coming out and our brain said, this isn't for me. Because this is nostalgia for a different generation than me. And I think that's the danger of the nostalgia bait that they're doing. Is if it hits right, you're like, oh, that's that thing that everybody loves. I should check it out, even if it's not your generation.
Yeah.
If it hits wrong, which I think this is the poster child for, instead of going to see it, you think this isn't for me. And it turns out this is just an excellent action film that I think anyone who enjoyed like the Fast and the Furious movies would love this movie.
Yeah. It definitely didn't require being based on another property.
Yep.
There was nothing inherent to the Fall Guy that this one rested on. Like you said, they could have cut it out. They could have given it a different name. Though at the same time, I kind of wonder if the Fall Guy, this old 1970s action movie, is so obscure that most people didn't realize it was based on anything.
Maybe.
And so I don't know if that worked against it.
Yeah. My gut says it probably did.
Okay.
That there were enough of my generation that said, that's for my dad, and then didn't go to it. And then it turns out it's just a really fun movie. We'll talk spoilers like second half, so let's not talk spoilers right now.
Okay.
Like, what do you have criticisms of the film that can be talked about now, or should we put them in the spoiler section?
Because
I think I have one I can talk about.
One you can talk about? So there, can I spoil the nature of one stunt?
I think
it's in the commercials.
I think you can spoil like
in the
that.
commercials where you see he's following a car and he's like using a shovel or whatever to hang on, skating along on a piece of metal behind a car. That scene goes from inside of a tunnel to up on a bridge to in the middle of a city, even faster than New York geography should allow it to.
You mean Sydney, Australia? But
yes, but I'm saying
even faster than New York would, which has famously
even
compressed
faster
Manhattan.
Than a city full of tunnels and bridges and things. It just kind of wherever it needed to be scenically, it was.
This is actually plays into my big complaint. That I
Okay.
can make. I think the nature of this film wanted to encourage us to see movie logic in the movie portions where they're filming a film and things like this, and real world stuntmen in the real world. Meaning, he isn't a superhero in the real world. He just has stuntmen skill. So like this one isn't a big spoiler. He stops a car by being able to hit it and roll. I buy that in the real world, particularly because Ryan Gosling's so good at selling these things. Is that real? I don't know, but I buy that.
He puts the thing in his mouth to keep him from like biting his tongue. You can see that he is using actual techniques to absorb the hit and roll off of it.
It's a residential-ish street, like
Car's
totally.
not going super fast.
That's what I wanted to see. I feel like the movie didn't do that, and it's okay. It's an aesthetic choice. They didn't make they didn't do it wrong. They just made a choice and their choice was, this is going to take place when it's not in the movie. We are actually in Spy World, right? When they're not filming portions, Ryan Gosling's a superhero, and we're going by Spy World logic, and that undermined the film just a bit for me. For instance, without major spoilers, there's like a giant chase scene at the Sydney Opera House.
Yeah.
Right? It is wild to me that there is gunfire and, vehicles on fire, and there's no crowds at the Sydney Opera House where I've been as a tourist. And guess what? There's 1 million people on those steps getting their pictures taken, particularly when it's lit up and scenic at night. And there's nobody there in the film. There's no cops, automatic weapon fire. And that's okay in Spy World, right? When you're in a Mission Impossible film, This is just something that Emily and I talk about.
Yeah.
It's an alternate dimension called Spy World. And in Spy World, certain laws of physics apply and certain rules. You know, in John Wick, silencers are actually silent. The different universe where silencers are actually silent, and you can shoot at each other when you're walking through a crowded like subway hall or whatever it was, and no one will notice even when the bullets impact the stone.
Yeah.
In Spy World, that's okay. But I feel like this movie wanted to be like, this isn't like the movies, this is real life. But then real life was more unrealistic than the film.
Well, and even that was the speedboat thing.
Yes.
They took the time to set that up in advance and have him say, I learned how to drive a speedboat with my hands tied behind my back and jump it through a ring of fire.
Awesome, right?
It was incredible. It was so funny that they actually paid that off.
And that's the clever part of the writing. Some of those setups and payoffs,
oh, yeah.
Those are all over the place in this film.
And to take all that time and say, yes, it's plausible this could happen because he is a trained stuntman and he knows how to do this specific stunt. And then you surround it with other things that are completely implausible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the movie just kind of fights with itself a little bit like that. That's like the thing that would have, for this movie, kept one of the two things, the one I can talk about in non-spoilers, that keeps it from being elevated to an 8 or a 9. But man, those performances, the scene with Emily Blunt and him in the car where he's been singing to Taylor Swift and then she gets in, just the writing there, the dialogue and the performances, the thing where he's acting, he's on the set and they're having a conversation over megaphones, doubling for metaphors for certain things. Really hilarious and fun to watch. And it's that sort of writing that I really enjoy. So some of the writing is just fantastic. And the acting, like both of them sold those roles. Really cool that they never needed to do damsel in distress, right? Like Emily Blunt never needed to, be completely helpless. And the film works really well without that. In fact, better than if they had done that. I really liked that aspect to it. The dog, every use of the dog was amazing.
Oh, the dog was incredible.
Yeah. And the supporting cast was always there, and selling everything. So good job on everybody.
I think my favorite bit in the entire movie is when he's in the car chase and he leans over and he buckles the dog in and says, "Engage your core."
And then they pay that off because the dog then barks at him because he doesn't have his seatbelt on until he puts his seatbelt on. So yeah.
Would you believe that that's the same guy that wrote Hobbs and Shaw?
I haven't seen Hobbs and Shaw, but I would believe it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know this was one of the producers on John Wick. It was a stunt man who is the director.
Yes.
He's done a lot of cool films.
David Leitch was the uncredited co-director on John Wick with Chad. I'm not going to even try his last name.
So, and he was one of the producers on John Wick. So anyway, let's go into spoilers.
Spoiler territory.
So ever since I've seen the film, and it's more fresh for me, so I'm not sure if the actual logic of what was going on, the twist is a great twist, right?
Yes.
This is a fantastic twist. The twist being, spoilers, go watch this movie. You're going to love this movie. Don't let me, But the twist is the fall guy gets called in because he's the stunt double of the actor. The reason for why he's brought is sketchy. And you're like, all right, I guess you just need him in the film. But it turns out he's brought in because he's the stunt double of the actor who's accidentally killed someone on film, and they need someone who plausibly looks like him to take the fall for him and become the fall guy. And that pun and that twist is just brilliant. It was foreshadowed exactly right so that I got it where I want to get it, which is earlier than most people do, but it wasn't right out the gate, right?
Yeah.
You had that moment where the producer lady's like, we brought you in because you know where to find him and you can talk him into, you're like,
You can help him with stuff. You can do things.
Fly someone to Australia for that. And then the payoff is, no, she needs a patsy to take the fall.
Well, and I loved her character. First of all, it's Rebecca from Ted Lasso, who is the best part of Ted Lasso. And I 100% believe that she doesn't think of herself as a criminal. She just is a producer on set who is solving a problem.
Yep.
My bankable star has accidentally killed someone. I'm just going to roll with this. I'm going to solve it. I'm going to make it go away, and then we'll keep going.
Yep. That's her job. Make sure the film keeps going. And
I thought that worked for me really well.
The big problem for me is that so many of their actions don't make sense under that underlying premise. Some of them do, like calling him in makes sense. Framing him, the sequence of events is like, go find him. He goes to the bedroom, finds out, oh, I have to go to this club, goes to the club tells him how to get into the room, and there he finds the dead body and they film him leaving. They actually,
they film him leaving the hotel where the dead body was.
Where the dead body might be someone else, but they frame him there.
Yeah.
That's a perfect setup for framing a guy. You have his fingerprints on the room. You could get him to hold the murder, whatever. You've done a perfect setup. So why in that situation do they drug him when he goes to the club when all they need to do is you want him to go find the dead body and incriminate himself, and they do everything they can to prevent him from taking that step.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. They then try to murder him so they can pretend that it's a murder-suicide. Guess what? You're shooting him with automatic weapons. People do not commit suicide by filling themselves with automatic weapon fire in the torso.
Yeah.
Like, their actions do not make any sense once you find out the twist. And this happens with so many twists, and it prevents you from being able to guess it accurately. And so it left me confused because I got it when I'm like, all right, she's behind it, the producer lady. But when I found out, I had to put in my head, but the guy must not know, the star, which is why he has his thugs protecting him. He must think that the Fall Guy's actually trying to kill him, because otherwise none of these actions make sense.
None of it makes sense.
And then you find out and you're like, oh, you just made it not make sense to make cool action scenes. And, I get it. I've been there. I've written these stories and been like, I don't know if I can fix this. But it really, it made the whole thing hang together by string instead of by iron bars, I suppose.
Yeah, by more thread than it should have been. One thing that I feel like we could have fixed is at the end when they're like, we're going to catch him. We're going to get him to confess.
Yes.
Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt are making their plan, and they're like, we're going to get him to do this in the car because he does his own stunts. And they look at him and they say it in unison, and they're like, he does his own stunts. We've got him. And then that never matters.
Yeah, because he doesn't do his own stunts.
Because he doesn't do his own stunts. The fact that he wants people to think he does his own stunts doesn't matter to the finale. Yeah. Like, no aspect of that. They presented it as if it were a huge payoff of something, and it wasn't anything.
And that whole finale went into Spy World just
too much?
Yeah. Plot holes don't matter. What getting kicked out of a film does, right? When they said our plan is to force him to confess under duress while we are threatening to drive him off a cliff, that's not a confession. Right?
That's not going to hold up anywhere.
Not only would it not hold up in court, you tell me you did that and I'm not going to buy it. That's a confession. The public opinion court. So even if it was so... this is a movie full of implausible things, and that's the most implausible thing, that confession matters at all. And that bothered me. It kicked me right out of the film because so much had been so clever that
Yeah.
And, I get writing yourself in a corner and getting to the third act and being like, we need to get a confession out of him. Well, we've got a really cool action set piece. Maybe that will cover up the fact that this doesn't
We'll
make sense.
pretend we'll do this huge jump.
Yeah.
I did enjoy that whole helicopter chase, and the truck down below is chasing the helicopter with an inflatable to try to catch them when they fall.
Stunt
That
guys
was fun.
versus security team. Really fun to watch. So much of this movie is just extraordinarily fun.
Yeah.
And highly recommend it. But go into it being like, what I really need is a really fun 7, which is kind of what the Fast and Furious movies are, right? Really fun 7 to 8, not I'm going in expecting, something like John Wick, which rewrites your understanding of a given subgenre.
Yeah. Exactly. Speaking of the Fast and Furious movies, I'm surprised you haven't seen Hobbs and Shaw.
I know.
Because that's one I have. I've seen 3 Fast and the Furious movies. It's 1 and 5 and then Hobbs and Shaw.
So
how did I see it? And you didn't.
People say Hobbs and Shaw isn't very good.
It isn't very good.
So I don't have time to watch movies that people tell me are not very good, sources that I trust. Because I can see so few movies these days because of the amount of things that I have on my plate. So I didn't see it for that reason, even though I like Hobbs and I like Shaw and I like the director, and I thought this will be a good film.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you missed the part where The Rock is like, we could solve this problem. I know a whole ton of Polynesian guys. And then they solved the problem with the liberal application of Polynesian guys.
Well, that's a good selling point for a film. Sounds like it would be fun. Should we say something to Ben?
Should we say something to Ben?
Maybe we've said enough to Ben.
Maybe Ben. I was sent last week a wedding invitation. There was one in the envelope for me, one for you, and one for Ben.
Well, go to the wedding, Ben.
Yeah.